All right. Hey, y'all. My name is Maddie Kraus. I am a third-year occupational therapy student at Duke University, working with ALS United Illinois, Indiana, and Missouri. And I am here with another fellow Maddie and OT, who's here to talk about her caregiving journey. So welcome. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi. So my name's Maddie Rynkiewich. I am an occupational therapist. I have worked my career in a majority of home health, a little bit dabbled in ortho, but the majority of my career has been in home health. But as of recently, I have transitioned from working in the field to now being a full-time caregiver for my husband, Frank, who was diagnosed with ALS in 2021. So now I'm focusing my time and my energies on being his caregiver, and also being a mother to our two little boys, raising them. And I'm really excited to be here today and talk a little bit about our story, where our story started, and how the caregiving journey has been for me personally, and how I've also had a interesting lens on caregiving, of being a mother and in parenthood, and also by being an occupational therapist, and how that's how I've approached caregiving through that lens. So thanks for having me, Maddie.
Of course. Thank you for being here. And you've already kind of mentioned a little bit already. You wear many hats. So could you take us back to when your husband was first diagnosed? What life kind of looked for you at that time?
Yeah. So my husband, Frank, he was diagnosed at 30 years old. So I was just 29. Our little boys were 2 and 3. Just prior to his diagnosis, we had moved into our forever home. He had a very successful and joyful career. I was working part time while also raising our young boys. We like to say that we were in the trenches and the peaks of parenthood. So, the highs and lows of being new parents, and also the stressors that come with that, while also experiencing the incredible joys of parenthood. But one day he had approached me with some really peculiar symptoms. It had started with him noticing in the gym some strength loss. He was very, very in tune with his body. He was a bodybuilder, did weightlifting as a hobby. So at first he thought the strength loss, it started in his grip and in his shoulder. He also had trouble pulling back his compound bow in preparation for hunting season. He's an outdoorsman. He also started with the muscle fasciculations, so like the muscle twitches, started in his upper extremities, but then, when they started spreading to more muscle groups, that's when we became like increasingly concerned and worried. We hoped that these issues would be orthopedic in nature, potentially like a cervical spine issue. And even as an occupational therapist, I did not recognize initially the severity of what these symptoms could mean. I think I was guarding myself and hoping that it could be an easily treated orthopedic issue. And I was just trying to protect myself from worrying too much that it could be a much more serious neurological issue. But when he was diagnosed, we had spent many, many hours in the neuro clinic. And fortunately, my husband was diagnosed very quickly. And I know that that's not always the case for ALS. So we were fortunate to have that quick diagnosis. And when one receives a diagnosis of ALS, it is recommended that you get a second opinion. So in my husband's case, we actually had a second, third, and fourth opinion. But ultimately, at diagnosis, we were in our young adult prime of life, building our marriage and our future together. And then now with the diagnosis, that was tangled with managing the complexities and the stressors of a devastating disease.
Okay, you kind of cut out for a second there, but I think you're back.
Oh, okay.
Can you just repeat what the last sentence that you said? I'm sorry.
Yeah. So at the time of diagnosis, we were in our young adult prime of life, building our marriage, building our future together. And now that was tangled with managing the complexities and the stressors of a devastating disease.
Of course, and that like you said, there's so much going through your mind during that time. You are, you're a new mom, you're a working mom, you're a wife, you're all of these things. Like I said, you wear many, many hats. And one thing that we've talked about when we talked previously on the phone was, you said you'd mentioned some coping strategies and just, going through this with your kids who have grown up kind of in tandem with this disease, unfortunately. But can you talk a little bit about what it's been like navigating this with young kids?
Yeah. Um, at the time of diagnosis, so much was going through our mind. With our little boys just being 2 and 3 when my husband was diagnosed. I mean, at that time we were learning to navigate the challenges of parenthood while balancing careers, making a foundation for our marriage, our family, and our future. And so the question was like, how are we going to manage through this? Knowing that this is a disease that steals independence, it takes, it robs parenthood, it causes tension and family dynamics and emotional turmoil, and not to mention immense financial hardship. So to experience that much stress while still finding structure and normalcy for our children's sake and well-being, it's a juggling act that is hard to even put into words. Like, as much as I wanted at times to throw myself a pity party, I couldn't because our children needed us. In a sense, they gave us strength, they gave us resiliency, they gave us a purpose in finding ways to navigate and modify and adapt of, how to tackle each day with a sense of joy and purpose. And I remember telling myself, what do I want my kids to remember about their childhood? And that constantly ran through my mind. Do I want them to remember heartache? Do I want them to remember sadness and grief and stress? I was fearing that they would only remember the sorrows of the disease and the hardship of the disease, but that drove us to take the little stuff and turn it into the big stuff. I want them to remember the joy and care and uniqueness to their day. I want them to see gratefulness and seeing their parents, navigate challenges with resiliency and in a way that there's always another way to tackle a challenge. And so at times when I would become heavy with grief about how the disease of ALS would impact our children, I would think about that question of, how do I want my children to remember this? And I don't want them to only know ALS in their childhood. So that became our goal as parents, of how do we intertwine their childhood with navigating this illness. And both of us really refused to let ALS control their childhood. And that was one of the mottos that really got us through a lot of hardship in the beginning stages of the disease. Um, and also at that time too of diagnosis, you're met with so much heavy grief, and I would classify it as anticipatory grief. So, we were mourning all the loss of all the things we'd lose out on as a couple navigating parenthood together. We felt almost robbed of our parenthood, and it was really easy to get stuck in that mindset of the sadness of losing out on parenting moments the way we imagined and dreamed and envisioned them. Um, it came with feelings of jealousy towards friends and family who were navigating parenthood the way we wanted to be, rather than navigating parenthood with this like blanket of heaviness of a terminal illness. To see others in our life experiencing family moments that we would no longer be able to do was at times depressing and honestly infuriating at times. However, like, as our children grew, along with the disease progressing, the grief and the jealousy didn't stay. It wasn't permanent. It would, ebb and flow. And we found something like beautifully unexpected. And that was this new way of raising our children that would be sacred. And it was finding joys in the smaller things of life. It was finding contentment in the small pleasures of the day. It provided us with more intentional time with one another. Um, it was a parenthood that taught our children resiliency and also, um, compassion for others. And those were unexpected surprises that we didn't anticipate at the beginning of the diagnosis. We had no idea that those would be unexpected surprises in navigating parenthood with terminal illness. And, um, just the complexities of raising children with this disease and how they were woven together. Um, we didn't anticipate that there was going to be so much joy in the grief with raising our kids during this.
You beautifully said. Wow. It's like taking my brain a second to process all of the, like you said, the complexities and the interwoven. And
Yeah,
just, I think there is a component of anticipatory grief and
yeah,
also still reminding yourself to be present and pick
yeah,
up on the little joys of things, which is
yeah.
hard, but a beautiful hard. And I
It
think you said
yeah,
it well.
I mean, it's, like, raising children is it's chaotic. Um, Caregiving while child rearing is a threshold of exhaustion that is so difficult to describe, and you're not only caring for the little humans in your life, but you're caring for the well-being of your spouse too. So you're taking care of the well-being of so many humans at one time, and it's intense, it's draining, it's chaotic, but it's beautiful too, because there are going to be those hard conversations with your children. There's going to be sad situations. There's going to be big feelings, worries, concerns, and navigating everyone's needs being met is a challenge most of the time. I tell my family, like, okay, I don't have 8 arms like an octopus, like one person at a time. So that has taught our children a lot of patience. And it's provided our children with a unique childhood too. With our youngest only being 2 when my husband was diagnosed, he doesn't remember life without ALS. Um, and so, you know, as the kids, grew and the disease progressed, it was really beautiful seeing how they could modify how they bonded with their dad. That was really remarkable. And I want others to know if they're facing ALS with young children that there are ways to adjust in how we engage with our loved ones. Um, just like for a quick example, our children, they used to play on the floor with daddy all the time, playing Legos. Um, and when Frank couldn't get on the floor anymore due to leg weakness and balance issues, the children so easily transitioned to, okay, well, we're going to play Legos at the counter instead. So every day, they'd get all the Legos out on the kitchen counter and they would do it there seated at the counter. When they noticed that their dad could no longer sit in a kitchen chair, they went to the recliner and they played Legos on daddy when he was laying in the recliner. And they did something really sweet called Daddy Mountain. So they would have all their Lego guys, and the Lego guys would have to climb from daddy's feet all the way up to his head.
Oh,
When Frank was laying there in the recliner, and just seeing how they adapted along with the disease progression was pretty remarkable. Kids are a lot more resilient than, we give them credit for. And some of the other things that have been so joyful to watch that I never expected, um, you know, how they bond with him is so special because we get really creative. For example, like Halloween, we turned his we turned his wheelchair into a Hot Wheels race car.
that's
Um,
awesome.
so like the little boys, they rode their bikes and we put numbers on them and they had Hot Wheels shirt. Um, and then I was the pit crew, and Frank's entire power wheelchair was created into a Hot Wheels race car, and it was amazing. And it brought our family so much joy. And I know, like, looking back now, like, that memory would have never been created if it weren't for our circumstances. And so, just how they bond with Frank has changed, and, it's really beautiful, and seeing the kids navigate the complexities of the disease, like, they have learned so much compassion for others. They're very attentive to Frank's needs. Um, I'm really interested in seeing what their future career is if they go into healthcare. There's been several instances where I've seen the boys, I'll go in the bedroom and they're stretching and massaging Frank because they know it feels good for him.
Yeah.
That was completely unprompted. They just did that on their own will. So I know that even though we have those really hard days with hard um, conversations and big feelings and sad emotions, the joy and the grief, they coexist. And I know you had mentioned earlier in one of your questions some of the coping strategies that we've used for the kids. We have a lot. um, Being 2 and 3 years old, it's hard to explain to your children what ALS is. Um, so it's really less as explanation and more like through actions and demonstration, and caring for your loved one with ALS and how your children see how you care for your loved one. They're gonna see, well, for our children, I mean, they saw a lot of medical personnel in our home. They're hearing a lot of medical jargon that's not the normal part of childhood.
Yeah.
They're seeing a lot of equipment in our home. They're noticing physical changes to their dad. So I think something that's a really healthy coping for children is having intentional time outside of the home and away from that environment to just partake in normal childhood activities. Um, I really try to find time with each boy to spend doing something that they like, whether it's mini golf or going to the zoo or going to a restaurant, just trying to keep that normalcy. And also too, having so much new medical equipment come in can be scary for children. Um, they're also naturally curious about it.
Yep.
So being really open and honest in a child appropriate way of what that piece of equipment is used for really helps them find that safety with that equipment of, oh, okay, that's a new piece of equipment in our home, but that's going to help daddy breathe better. So keeping it really simple in your explanations, but something that has been so um, helpful in our boys coping with the new medical equipment is they get to name every single piece of medical equipment that comes into our home. It's a super silly thing, um,
That's sweet.
but it is their favorite thing. So everything has a name. I mean, every single piece of medical equipment has a name in our home. For example, when Frank got his feeding tube, it's a peg tube, so they named it Peggy. So now they get to help mommy feed Peggy and water Peggy, which they think is so fun. Um, and I think explaining it in a kid-friendly way helps them cope with the change because they're noticing that daddy can't eat by mouth anymore. So when they know that, oh, well, daddy just gets a straw straight to his belly now, they think that's something that they can relate to because they drank their juice box out of the straw. So now
Yep.
they know that daddy has a straw right to his belly. Um, and also too, like his wheelchair, my husband Frank, he got his wheelchair in his favorite sports team colors. So it's black and yellow for the Pittsburgh Pirates and the Pittsburgh Steelers. So the wheelchair is named Steeler after the Pittsburgh Steelers.
I
His
love it.
walker that he had was named Walker. The kids have a
Perfect.
Walker, so they're like, oh, Walker. The feeding bag stand is called Stan the Man. Even the pulse ox that checks the heart rate and his oxygen is called Chompy because it chomps his finger.
Yep.
Frank's suction machine they named Slurpee because he slurps everything up. And It has been so cute watching the boys name every new piece of medical device, and the one that we find the most silly is so we have a, ceiling Hoyer lift above the bed to help transfer Frank, from the bed to the wheelchair, and, to them, the ceiling lift, when it comes down, it looks like that arcade game, The Claw,
Yeah.
and so, also, they love Toy Story, so if you remember in Toy Story, the little green aliens that
They
Pizza's
go, "The claw."
yeah, they go, "The Claw." So now the ceiling Hoyer lift is named The Claw, and it's like, I mean, you do what you can in an age-appropriate manner to help your children cope, and if that is naming all of our equipment very silly names, then we do it, and, so I think that's probably the best piece of advice I have for others going through this with young children, and also too, like, just honestly preparing them for procedures. Um, so it can be really helpful, like reading books ahead of time. For example, my when we knew my husband was going to get the feeding tube, there were several children's books out there about feeding tubes. And it talks about the surgery and what to expect in the recovery and the different type of feeding tubes there are, but it did it in an age appropriate way and different age appropriate conversations. And that way they felt prepared for this change. And then they knew that daddy was going to be okay because they had already read the book about it. So I really think that's a great coping strategy too, is reading books ahead of time. Because I think when the children feel prepared for a change, it really helps them cope through that.
That's so wonderful. You guys have done so many wonderful things to support your kiddos, growing up in what could be considered an abnormal childhood, but to them, it's all that they know.
Yeah.
And I was just wondering, you're balancing so many roles as we've mentioned, already in this podcast episode, but how do you think that your background as an OT specifically has kind of shaped how you navigate, if at all?
Yeah, I mean, man, contributing my knowledge as an OT practitioner, I think has been invaluable in management of Frank's disease. Initially, though, this sounds odd, but it was almost painful because it was bittersweet. Since I am in healthcare, I had a level of understanding of what to expect and what to anticipate with the disease that he didn't. And so it was hard for me because I was already grieving losses that hadn't even come yet, just because I had that underlying knowledge from my job. Um, but at the same time, I say it's bittersweet because that knowledge allowed me to ensure that needs were proactively met. I plan ahead and I prepare as much as possible. So we actually balanced each other well because I was the planner of, the realistic logistics of the future while he like grounded me in staying present and not letting anxiousness of the future like overwhelm my thoughts of the day. So at times it was hard to turn off my OT brain and exchange it for just wife brain. Um, but my career in it was so beneficial in understanding so many different complexities of the disease, obtaining medical equipment, transitioning with different assistive devices for mobility aids, just helping my husband with his daily care, transferring safely, fall prevention. Um, my OT knowledge, it has been really rewarding for me that I have been able to use that, to help love and care for my husband.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Um, You'd mentioned some of the you've been going alongside this disease for a while, and we've mentioned a couple times some of the transitions. Um, and you had said when we spoke on the phone too, that you've utilized a lot of adaptive technology. You've had a lot of equipment come into your home. Um, can you share kind of, I know that encompasses so much, but can you share a little bit about what that has looked like uh,
Yeah.
for you guys?
Yeah, so, so many transitions in this disease progression. There's so many, I can't even talk about all of them, but like something that sticks out is the loss of communication. So, the disease causes facial paralysis. So, um, when my husband started that transition of, having the slurred and the dysarthric speech and really trouble talking, that was tough as a family. Um, Tough for our children, tough for myself, tough for my husband. Um, Navigating the loss of communication, I think, has been one of the hardest transitions. Um, it's my husband would get frustrated because we couldn't understand him clearly. Our children would get frustrated because they couldn't understand what their daddy was telling them. I would get frustrated because um, the length of time it takes to have a conversation, it's it's really hard to navigate that. And it's hard to parent when you're losing the ability to speak. It's hard to parent when your spouse can't help with um, speaking to our children, or disciplining our children, or sharing love with our children, words of affirmation with our children. Um, but that's when, like, we were so blessed with assistive technology. He uses the eye gaze device, the Tobii Dynavox. So it has the eye tracking and it has the on screen keyboard. So using the assistive technology to communicate, it's been a blessing, but it's also been something that we've had to navigate and learn, because just, socially speaking with somebody, the conversation moves so quickly. When you're trying to discipline children or trying to teach children a life lesson, or just trying to talk with your children about their school day, all of that requires time.
Yep.
And when my husband is communicating with his assistive technology, it does take patience. The length of the conversation takes a lot longer, and that's really hard for children to adapt. There's times where my husband is still typing a sentence to the boys and they've already left the room, because they have a short attention span. So I think that's something that we're still trying to navigate in teaching the boys, that they need to allow Frank plenty of time to finish his conversation before they leave the room. Um, and even I struggle with that too, of um, just spousal conversations are hard, um, for how long it takes, for him to type a response. So it's been a transition for everyone. It's been a hard transition for everyone, the loss of the communication. So we're working with the Tobii Dynavox. We're trying to figure out, like the different tips and tricks of, to maybe already have like the pre-populated messages on there. So maybe he just has to do one click and it, provides a sentence, rather than having to type out the whole sentence. So we're still learning. We're still trying to navigate that complexity. So I say that's one of the toughest transitions we've had to overcome, is the communication, and respecting communication, and respecting that Frank is still a dad, that he still wants to be a part of raising his kids. And so with that comes, we need to allow for the time for him to engage in that. And so we're navigating through it. We're not perfect. We all get frustrated. We all lose our patience. But I think um, I think that we're gonna get there. um, and that was one big transition I know that we've struggled with.
Well, and like you mentioned, just even a conversation, and especially with little kiddos, I teach preschool too. So they're in the room one second, out of the room the next second. They're looking at the
Yeah.
Legos, then they're watching what's out the window, and it's like
Yeah.
realizing, okay, like I have to, even as adults, it is hard to
Yeah.
sometimes let people finish what they're trying
Yes.
to say. Um, I'm a very talkative person, and so sometimes people are like, Maddie, I wasn't done yet. And it's like, okay, let me, I'll sit here and because I want to hear what people have to say. And so that's just another like dynamic being somebody who hasn't, you know, gone through that with somebody of the use of the assistive communication. That's
Mhm.
just like something that, I mean, obviously being involved in this project, like I've talked to people about it, and so I have some concept, but um, listening to you explain that is, it just really kind of hit home. It's like, wow, that does, it takes patience on both parties' part because
Yeah.
um, I'm sure Frank's brain is, thinking of what his response to the next question is, and he's still having to take the time to type out. And yeah,
Yeah.
patience is definitely a virtue. And that
Yeah.
kind of brings me to like, how has your relationship, you and Frank, evolved through all of this? And like, what helps you guys stay connected as a couple?
Oh gosh. So this disease, it places a tremendous amount of strain on relationships. Because we've noticed, there is a shift from husband wife to patient caregiver. And that's that's a hard transition. And I think that, and it even kind of relates to the communication. So you're kind of losing your normal spousal conversations with just the patient caregiver tasks that need to be done for the day. And then on top of that, too, you know, me as a caregiver, I'm taking on spousal roles that weren't previously mine. So I'm coping with that extra weight, which is really heavy. And the one thing that we have been working on together is it's incredibly important to carve out time together without distractions, without interruptions, undivided attention, and make sure that that time together is truly husband, wife, spouse time, not patient caregiver time. So, like, for example, something small that we've recently started doing is listening to classical music together before bed. Um, so the kids are in bed, I'll get into bed with Frank, and we're not talking about caregiving needs. We're not talking about schedules. We're not talking about kids. We're just next to each other. I have my arm around him. I'm holding his hand. I'm touching his arm. And we're just like soaking in each other's presence and listening to that music to just get a calm state of mind before bed. And that has been really therapeutic for us. And I think that it's really hard to navigate, you know, when your spouse loses the physical abilities to participate in normal spousal activities. Um, Trying to find something that still bonds you together. Um, and the strange thing is neither one of us listened to classical music before
Yeah.
ALS, but it was just something random that one night we just put it on the TV on YouTube. And you know what? We both had a really stressful day, And we said, you know what? We're just going to lay here and we're just going to hold hands and we're just going to listen and just kind of clear our mind and just be present together. Um, and I think that that was really a beautiful moment for us in connecting in a way that didn't even require words, but it reflected that we were making intentional, uninterrupted presence with each other, if that makes sense.
Yeah, of course. And that's so important. And even just in, you know, take ALS out of the dynamic, it's so hard to just like slow down. And I try to remind myself, let me like journal before bed, let me read
Mhm.
before bed, let me do anything else besides scroll on my phone
Yeah,
for TikTok. And
yeah.
it just, that is like such a creative and special and important moment. And I think it is kind of, it's cute how you guys didn't listen to classical music before,
Yeah,
but, like, that's
you know,
that's part of your routine now,
it's
and
gonna be a routine now, and we both look forward to it, um, and it's also have you ever heard of the 5 love languages?
yes.
Okay, like so my love language, okay, mine are words of affirmation and acts of service. My husband's are physical touch and quality time. With disease progression, like, we both noticed that neither one of us were getting our love languages met, and it was causing conflict. It was causing strain, and, our circumstances are incredibly straining, so that was driving a wedge. So, we're trying to refocus on, like, how we can modify our love languages to each other. So we have to adjust like what that looks like and how we offer it to our loved one. So like for example, he now messages me daily words of affirmation, encouragement, and support while I'm working on exchanging like caregiver touch with incorporating more like spousal touch. And it's a work in progress. It's definitely a work in progress, but recognizing that, you know, the way we show our love to one another, it's going to change with the disease, but there are ways to modify and to adjust in showing our love to each other.
Of course, of course, and I think the love languages in general, I just find fascinating, but I think
Mhm.
that it is really special and important that you guys have recognized, like, "Okay, we're missing each other here. How
Yeah.
can we adapt and
Mhm.
get creative and
Reconnect.
reconnect?" Exactly. Um, oh my goodness. We talked on the phone last week, and there are just, like, so many things that we could go into, um, but kind of doing a 180, I guess, we had
Mhm,
talked about your work with a vocational rehab and a rehab
mhm.
engineer. Um, Maybe this was a few years ago, or like I said, we're taking a pivot, but I wanted to talk about that because that was a really interesting experience that you guys had when with Frank still being able to go to work for a bit.
Mhm.
If you
Yeah.
wanted to
I can
share just a little bit.
Sure, yeah. So my my husband, he has always been, very motivated. He's had a very strong work ethic. So, at the time of diagnosis, a common thought is, "Okay, well, how am I gonna continue working?" Um, as his spouse, I wanted to support him in continuing employment if that's what he chose to do. And he wanted to because for him personally, continuing employment in a job and a career that he loved, it was very therapeutic for him. It gave him purpose to his day. It gave him meaning to his day. He felt that continuing working, it distracted his mind. And that motivated him to get up every day. That kept him in a healthy state of mind. That made him feel good as a spouse to be able to still contribute to his family. And so we had a really unique experience in that we were able to work with vocational rehab. We were able to work with an assistive technology professional and rehab engineer to keep Frank working for quite a long time through his disease progression. Um, so my husband, he's a mechanical engineer by degree. However, at the time of diagnosis, he had shifted into more a management role. So he was managing a group of about 50 employees, and he loved that role. He loved the people building skills. He loved leading a team. And that's what brought joy to him in his day. So we embarked on this journey of, you know what, we're going to do what we can to modify and adjust as long as we can and for as long as it works and as long as he wants to. So we were really fortunate with a phenomenal employer who supported us in making modifications in the workplace to allow Frank to continue working. Some of these modifications included incredible assistive technology. He was, at the point where he could no longer use his hands due to paralysis. However, some of the assistive technology that he used, that Voc Rehab and the rehab engineer provided, was a head mouse control system. So he had a sensor on his forehead, and then he had a sip and puff straw headset. And wherever he moved his face, that's where the cursor moved on his computer.
Oh, very cool.
It was amazing. To click on his computer, he had the sip and puff straw. So I can't remember the exact dynamic of it. I think if he sipped it, it would left click, and if he puffed, it would right click. So I initially was concerned with, okay, is he going to be able to adapt to this technology pretty quickly? Is this going to be frustrating for him? He blew my mind. He picked up on that technology so quickly, and I almost think it was because like his brain is so resilient that it was like his brain knew that he had lost his hands, the motor function of his hands. So it just modified and it adapted, and it was able to allow him to perform these super precise clicks with the headset technology, and he was really efficient with it. He managed budgets, he made spreadsheets, he made presentations,
Wow.
all using that technology. I remember coworkers would come into his office and just watch him work because they were fascinated. And so that was really inspiring to see him going into work despite his paralysis, despite his challenges, and finding other ways to do things that brought him joy and purpose. So that was a really, really cool accommodation. He had a really amazing desk that, could elevate and lower to accommodate his power wheelchair. The neatest accommodation was that I was able to be with him as his his personal care attendant. So he was able to navigate the complexities of his job with the assistive technology. And then I was able to help him with the self-care aspects of the day that he needed. And so that was a really unique time of our life, and that I got to see him in the workplace doing what he loved. And it was really cool too, because, his coworkers had noticed that like his speech was getting slurred and he was a little bit more difficult to understand. So he was able to utilize the Tobii Dynavox, the assistive technology eye tracking device at work to communicate with his coworkers. And it was so cool to see his coworkers support him and encourage him and um, work with him in accommodations, whatever that was that they needed. That was really, really touching to see his coworkers help with those accommodations. Even it got to the point where they would do like the Teams chat meetings and have meetings. And when he lost the ability to speak, he was still able to type in the chat box. So he would like click the little wave button and it would wave. So the whole meeting knew that Frank had something to say, and then he would type it in the text chat box. I mean, he was able to find so many different ways to adapt, which was really, really cool. And then the disease progressed, and then it became just more of a taxing effort to leave the home. And so he transitioned working from home. He was able to use all of that assistive technology at his work desk, work office from home. And then he had an ICU stay for respiratory decline. Um, he had a respiratory infection and he was in ICU for 5 days for respiratory decline. And so, following that hospital stay, was when we ended, was when he ended employment because it just, at that point, it was just too hard on his body to continue working. And so he really had to find new joys and new purpose in his day. And as an occupational therapy practitioner, that's like the core of our career, is like helping our patients find purpose and meaning. And so my husband found that writing was really therapeutic for him. So he had been working on a book for a long time, and so now so now he's transitioned from working in an office to now he writes because it's therapeutic for him. And he wrote a 7-chapter book on his Tobii Dynavox. So letter by letter, using his eyes, he
Wow.
typed the book. Yeah. The book is about his ALS journey, how it's impacted his daily life, and also like how that has transformed his faith too. And it's a beautiful story. It's actually coming out. It's being published in a few weeks. So we're really excited about that, for him to share his story with others. And I'm just really glad that he was able to use his writing in a therapeutic manner to bring joy to his day, because when he went from working full time to being at home, and when he can't physically do what used to bring him joy, he used to coach baseball teams, he used to um, go fishing, hunting, hiking. When you can't do those physical parts of your day that brought you happiness, you have to replace it with something else. And so I'm really, really glad that he found a sense of purpose and happiness with writing.
Yeah, that's
And
wonderful.
yeah, and like when he lost the strength in his hands, due to the paralysis, he lost the ability to physically handwrite. He lost the ability to physically type. So that was really discouraging at first. But the assistive technology that he was able to use, using that eye tracking to use the on-screen keyboard, like that opened up, independence for him. So I'm really glad that has allowed him to still like use his voice and to share his journey and to share his story and testimony, that I know will be really inspiring for others too.
Well, I can't wait to read it. I will be sending you an email so that
Yeah,
you can drop me the link when it's ready.
definitely.
But you've used the word resilient a lot, and I think it's an incredible word. It's one of my favorite words. I actually have it tattooed on my wrist. But I think it wholeheartedly describes you, your family, Frank, your children, and just everything. I think that you have played a huge role in embedding resilience into this experience because it can be hard and sad, and it is all of those things, but it can also be joyful and creative
Yeah,
and figuring out different avenues to, like you said, find meaning and purpose and
yeah,
um, just really kind of change your perspective on how things get done, but also still realize that there are ways to accomplish things that you want to do. And I think
mhm.
your story is just so incredible. Like I said, we could be here
Yeah.
for probably 3 more hours, but
Yeah.
I'll just ask you one final question and then we'll let you get back to your day. But I think, let's see. I want to make sure we end on a good one.
Okay.
So I think this is a good one to end on. When you reflect on everything and just all that your journey is and has been so far, and looking into the future, what does being a caregiver mean to you?
Oh man. Hmm. You know, I I can say with assurance that being a caregiver is the most selfless act of love that you can provide for someone. And that answer will remain constant. And being a caregiver is, tackling each day with grit and recognizing that the day is going to have challenges, but no matter the obstacles, you're going to get through it. You're going to surprise yourself with how much resilient is deeply rooted in you. And caregiving for ALS, you're going to give all that you have. And when you think that there is nothing left to give, you find out that you have even more to give. And I want to end on this piece of advice for other caregivers, and it's finding a motto for your day. And mine has always been, I can do hard things. And I put it on repeat in my brain every day. I can do hard things. I can do hard things. I can do hard things. And that motto, just saying that over and over, that motto has brought me through so many hardships. And so I really recommend that to other caregivers. It could be a song lyric. It could be a motto that you saw on your Pinterest board that you thought was encouraging. It could be a scripture verse from the Bible. It could be something supportive that a friend told you. But if you just put it on repeat and it's like your anthem to your day, that can really impact how you get through the hardships of each day.
Yeah, I think that's incredibly powerful. I think everything that you've said here today has been incredibly powerful. And like I said, I know we could talk for 3 more hours and there would be so much more to share. But I just really want to thank you for your time. Thank you for your, ability to be open and vulnerable about things that can be hard to talk about because there
Yeah,
are other people who are navigating this journey who may have some overlap from you and may be able to learn things from you. And so I just want to thank you so
yeah.
much for all the work that you've done for your kids and yourself and your husband and for being here today. So thank you, Maddie.
Thanks so much, Maddie, for doing this, and, I think it's wonderful that you chose the ALS community, for your project, and you will not find a more grateful community than the ALS community. So thank you for bringing a voice to caregivers and those affected by ALS, because you are making a difference in this project. So thanks for having me.
Well, thank you so much.